Chapter 7 The Road to Raging Fire. One of the greatest songs of the 20th century, What's Going On, wasn't a Four Tops recording, but we were there at its inception. One of the Tops, Obie Benson, co-wrote it with Marvin Gaye and Al Cleveland. What's Going On, an R&B classic that crossed over into pop, rock, and whatever category wanted to claim it, is honored by Rolling Stone magazine as one of the greatest songs of all time. It is truly a reflection of the times. As artists, we were witness to the horrors that were happening all around us. Our musical expression gave voice to what everyone was feeling. In the late 60s and early 70s, people were constantly shaking their heads, shocked and stunned by each new occurrence. Our cities were burning, the war in Vietnam was escalating, young people were protesting in universities across America. The civil rights movement, which started in the late 50s, used picketing, boycotts, and demonstrations in the fight for equal rights. Now their tactics were used by Women's Lib and the Peace Movement. All over the country, folks were rising up, protesting, marching, and sitting in. Discord, discontent, violence, and destruction were right outside our door on a daily basis and on the TV screen every night. Our boys, it seemed like a disproportionate number were black, were shipped home in body bags or returned to their families maimed and psychologically damaged. Funerals and memorials were an everyday occurrence. On top of that, some of our most beloved leaders, true visionaries, were assassinated, locked up, or run out of the country. Folks lived in a climate of shock, denial, pain, and fear. In 1970, with all the crazy shit happening around us, the Tops had just wrapped an all-night recording session where we were cocooned and insulated from what was going on in the streets. We joined Smokey Robinson for a few holes of golf and stopped off at Marvin Gaye's house to unwind. We were all very close, living only a few blocks from each other. Our work, which we were passionate about, flowed seamlessly into our personal lives. It was all one and the same. Even though what was happening in the real world sometimes seemed far away from our lives as Motown stars, we had family and friends who were directly affected by the war. Racism was a fact of life for all of us. That night we were kicking back, drinking beer, talking about our golf game, and Obie was going on and on about the state of the world. He'd just seen some police brutality go down on 12th Street. He was fussing about it and asking what the hell was going on. Marvin, as usual, was sitting at his piano, picking at the keys, fooling around. His brother Frankie had just returned home from Vietnam and told him about what was going on in Southeast Asia. He told Marvin what most black GIs were saying at the time. It made no sense to be fighting over there, losing our lives to spread freedom and democracy, and at home where we were supposed to be free, we were denied our rights and losing our lives too. Marvin was feeling what Frankie and Obie were echoing, and Obie could be very adamant about things, very passionate in his convictions, and he kept going on and on. All the while, Marvin was picking out a melody on the keyboard. Obie kept encouraging him, saying, yeah, that sounds good. Obie started laying the words on top of the music. What's going on? Marvin told him to keep on saying it. So for about 10 to 15 minutes, Obie kept repeating the same thing over and over, talking about how he felt, and Marvin kept putting music to it. They kept at it for at least an hour before I had someplace to go. I left, and the next day, Obie told me about this song that they'd just finished writing. What's going on? He said it was going to be a bad mama jamma. That was the last I heard of it until they recorded it. Then one day, I heard a playback of it while they were mixing it in the studio. I remember telling Marvin and Obie how soulful it sounded. All the people in the studio were saying the same thing. It was a bad song. Meanwhile, Obie kept working with Marvin on other songs for his album. When it was completed, the next decision to be made was which song would be released as a single. Barry didn't approve of Marvin's pick. What's going on? Marvin and Barry had a big fight over it. Barry was adamant that he didn't want any kind of political protest songs representing Motown at the time. He said that Motown songs were about love, joy, and happiness, music that people could dance to. Marvin argued that What's Going On was special. It's what people wanted to hear. Barry insisted that it wasn't the kind of message that Motown should be putting out. He was in the business of selling songs, not making social commentary. This went back and forth with them almost coming to blows. Finally, after a couple of weeks, they worked out some kind of deal. It didn't hurt that at the time, Marvin was married to Barry's sister, Anna Gordy. She must have been instrumental in helping Barry realize that he should give Marvin his creative freedom. To Barry's credit, he was able to constructively hear other opinions, so he backed down, and the rest is history. It turned out to be a great, great hit, much bigger than just a song. It was like an anthem, a plea for help, a meditation, and it still is. What's Going On tapped into the universal question people all over the country were asking. Everyone needed answers. It was an intergenerational, racially inclusive message that reached everyone. You didn't just have to live in an urban area to be affected by what it was saying. You could be in rural America, the heartland of the country, and still be shaken by the enormous upheavals and changes rocking the planet. But somehow, for me, what was going on sometimes seemed very far away. In my mind, the Detroit riot of 1967 wasn't as earth-shattering as people made it out to be. I was aware it was happening. At the time we were in the studio recording, our focus was beyond what was happening just a few blocks away. I knew that people were looting and burning and rebelling against bad conditions. It actually felt more like a social upheaval than a riot. In the end, I saw there were some improvements as a result of it. Some of the old buildings on 12th and 14th Streets, from Claremont to West Grand Boulevard, were torn down and rebuilt, which was good. But philosophically, my head just wasn't there at the time. Probably it should have been, but it wasn't. I was lucky. I'd sit on my porch drinking wine or champagne and just shake my head. This was at the peak of our careers. I was busy thinking about what we had to do in the studio, where our next tour was going, and all of that. The riot that had the most impact on me occurred when I was a kid, in 1943. Racial tensions in Detroit during World War II reached a peak with the KKK having a stronghold among newly arrived white migrants from the South. They were indignant about blacks competing with them for the same jobs. Housing conditions in the black sections of town were overcrowded. Nearly 250,000 blacks lived crammed together in 60 square blocks on Detroit's east side in an area known as Paradise Valley. At the time, some neighborhoods were still racially mixed with working-class whites. We had Italian neighbors who worked in the factories living across the street from us. Fighting between whites and blacks broke out at the bridge near Belle Isle Park one hot summer night. It rapidly spread throughout the city. I lived on Cameron and Owens on the east side. Sitting on my porch, I watched unspeakable acts of violence and brutality play out right before my eyes. Groups of armed whites from outlying neighborhoods traveled to the black side of town to attack residents. Black residents jumped on them and fought back. I saw a white guy get his throat slit with a razor. White mobs overturned cars owned by blacks and set them on fire. They beat black men as white policemen just looked on. It was just horrible. At the corner, people were fighting inside the Claremont streetcar. Rumors and stories circulated among both blacks and whites about atrocities perpetrated against them and kept the violence going. The rioting seemed like it lasted a week. For an 8-year-old kid, it was like forever. It actually took 2 days before federal troops were called in. Then it went to another level. I saw soldiers shoot a black guy out of a tree. A white doctor was beaten to death while making a house call in a black neighborhood. It finally took 6,000 soldiers to put an end to it. I might have been a kid, but I was not too young to know what was going on. I was almost crying. It was so bad. All this horrible stuff occurred around the time I couldn't force the words out of my mouth, singing praise to the Lord in my grandfather's church. It was when the lady in white came to me with assurance, saying everything would be all right, maybe to let me know that singing was my ticket out of there. My hometown going up in flames in 1967 might not have affected me outwardly, especially with all the good things happening in my career, but my alcohol consumption increased at the time. Perhaps it was a sign I preferred not to think about the hard stuff. Instead, I partied it up, living in an altered state. That was when I was part owner of the wine bar on Livernois Avenue. I drank so much, I used to eat a half of stick of butter before I left the house to line my stomach so I wouldn't get sick. I would drink from 10 o'clock in the morning until 2 o'clock the next morning. It all came with running a popular bar whose customers wanted to hang with an entertainer and a sports star, my co-owner Joe Strotter. Everybody in town started hanging out there. Entertainers, nightlifers, professional folks. It was a great mixture. My years watching Daddy Braggs manage and run the Paradise Club in Idlewild paid off. My life revolved around entertaining, hanging out, and recording. I was happy. I thought that was what life was all about. I wasn't looking to make any changes or take on any serious commitments. I had been married, and it didn't work out. It had brought me much grief. My life was arranged just the way I wanted. I had it all under control, or so I thought, until I met Piper. To put it bluntly, after I divorced, I vowed I would never ever get in that shit again. I had been burned by my ex-wife. I knew that I wasn't perfect either, but I wasn't looking for another wife. In fact, I was actively turning the other way. But there she was, sitting in the studio watching us record, expressionless, nonchalant. Most girls would be making eyes, trying to get you to look at them, but she was just sitting there. I didn't know at the time, but Piper Gibson was the most popular girl in her class at Cass Technical High School, a prestigious, academically challenging high school in downtown Detroit. She had been voted the prettiest girl in a racially mixed class of over 500 students. Not only was Piper beautiful with golden, caramel-colored skin, dark hair, and doe-shaped eyes, she was accomplished, ambitious, and smart, having just completed a year at Spelman College. She had recently returned to Detroit and enrolled in the University of Michigan. Piper had always had her pick of boyfriends. Her attitude was blasé and aloof, unimpressed. After my first glimpse, I asked Denise Gordy, Barry's niece, who was hanging out with her that night, to make introductions. In all my travels, to meet someone who was as good-looking and classy as Piper in my hometown was intriguing. Frankly, I'd never met anyone like this young lady, and right away I could tell she was the whole package. I wasted no time in inviting her to return to the studio for another session as my special guest. Piper came back a couple of nights in a row. Finally, we went out, just the two of us, to a nice supper club, Mozambique. After a couple of drinks and something to eat, I looked at her and said, "You know what, Piper? I'm going to marry you." She laughed, not taking me the least bit seriously. "You know what, Duke? You're crazy." "Well, that's what's going to happen," I told her, in all seriousness. I knew I was not letting her get away. Back in that day, badass, sexy blaxploitation sisters were up on the big screen, superheroes like Pam Grier. Piper was definitely in that category. She took no prisoners. From the very start, she captured me. I seriously started courting her. I took it as a wonderful challenge to win Piper's heart. The more I saw her, the more I talked to her, the crazier about her I got. On the road, I'd call her after the show. We'd talk long distance for 2 or 3 hours every night. It felt like young, first-time love. Maybe I'd never really been in love before, because I could tell this was different from my earlier relationships. The Duke I was years before would never have gotten to first base with Piper. She set the bar high with strong values about family, education, life, and love. As we got to know more about each other, I could tell that she was getting serious about me too. However, she revealed that our relationship probably wasn't going to work out. My mama doesn't want to meet you. I can't bring you home. I'd never encountered this situation before. Everyone I met was crazy about knowing one of the four tops. Well, how long do you think this is going to go on? I asked. I don't know. My mama doesn't want to hear anything about me dating someone in your business. She doesn't think much of show business people. Piper's mother, Sarah Gibson, was a well-regarded school principal in the Detroit public school system with a doctorate in education. She had raised her two daughters, Piper and her younger sister Kyle, almost single-handedly after her divorce from Piper's father. Providing for her girls, making sure that they were well-educated and culturally exposed, was her top priority. Sarah, Piper, and Kyle lived in a beautiful townhouse in a new development in downtown Detroit, along with an integrated group of doctors, educators, lawyers, politicians, and the like. Diana Ross had recently purchased a penthouse apartment in one of the condominium high-rises. The only other show business type I knew in the area was Eddie Holland's mistress, Jamie, who lived a few doors down from Piper in a lavishly decorated townhouse. The other neighbors politely regarded her as a kept woman. Certainly, Sarah didn't want Piper mentioned in the same breath, so Piper and I courted for a year or so in secret before her mother even knew. Still, our relationship kept growing, and Piper kept working on her mother to get her ready for an introduction. Finally, one day in 1972, she said, "Okay, my mother is ready to meet you." She was nervous. They were very tight. She respected her mom and didn't want to go against her. "Duke, you've got to be on your best behavior. I'm happy to meet her," I said. "Don't worry, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to come in your house cooking. I would like to prepare a dinner for her, a meal like my father does." Piper liked the idea and told her mother she had invited me over for dinner. When I arrived at their house, Sarah and I exchanged pleasantries. Then I told her that I'd like to make an Indian meal for her. She replied with a sassy laugh, "So get your ass cooking then." She could be funny. I made chicken curry with curry green beans and cut a watermelon in half and diced it all up. I made a whole meal and all the trimmings while she watched and listened to me tell her about my life, letting her know what being a performer was really like, how we recorded, where and why we toured, how the money worked, all the inside serious business stuff. I could see she was impressed, like she was thinking to herself, "Well, he ain't dumb, that's a relief." I could also tell that she'd heard a lot of negative stories about entertainers, and she expected me to be her worst nightmare. But by the time we had finished eating, Sarah and I were the best of buddies. One other thing I did was show Sarah how serious I was about her daughter's future. It sealed the deal. Right before the night was over, I put my money where my mouth was. "By the way, Piper, I got this extra money here," handing her over $4,000 in cash. "I want you to open a safety deposit box for you and me down the line," I said. As Sarah watched me hand Piper a wad of bills, I explained to her, "You know your daughter is going to be well taken care of. Don't worry about it." "You got all this to spare?" she asked me. "I got a good day job," I told her jokingly. I was honest and upfront about my commitment to my ex-wife and children. I explained it all to her, summing it up by saying, "A lot of my money goes to different places. I've got a family and I do right by them. I have enough money for what I need to do. If your daughter wants to come along with me, I'll always take care of her and give her the very best." That night, I won my future mother-in-law over. From then on, I started coming over to their house almost every day. Sarah and I were great friends for over 40 years until the day she passed away. But Sarah wasn't the only one whose objections I had to overcome. There were lots of people who predicted this was going to be a 2-week affair. It hurt me that my four top brothers didn't give us a month. They saw our relationship as a match between a show business guy and a cute little scholarly girl who had nothing in common. One of the guys actually had the nerve to say to me, "You're going to marry that skinny bitch?" I shot back, "First of all, she ain't skinny and she ain't no bitch. You're talking about the woman I'm going to marry. I would never say that about your wife." He quickly backed down. "Yeah, well, I didn't mean it like that." I was pissed, but I knew where they were coming from. They were still friends with my first wife, Inez. Their wives had been tight since their Ziggy Johnson days. All they could see was that Piper was young and beautiful. I reassured them that there was much more to her than that. Yes, she was good looking, but she had what it took to be my girl forever. I'd finally found my sugar pie honey bunch. The prediction I made on my first real date with Piper, that I was going to marry her, came true in 1974. A year later, we welcomed our beautiful baby daughter, Farah, into the world. It was a good thing that I got a chance to start over to build a strong home life to sustain me. Little did I know my Motown family was soon going to come apart. The string of hits like the ones we enjoyed in the mid-60s and early 70s were no longer guarantees. Our next releases were hit and miss at best.